ladies, gents, and non-binary mates, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. Now, before we get started, make sure you follow me on all of my social media so you know exactly what I get up to when I am not on YouTube. So we've actually already talked a little bit about Fredrik Backman before when I did my Anxious People video. And by the way, today I just found out that Anxious People has like a mini series on Netflix, so if you like that book as much as I did, then I definitely recommend that you go watch that. But if you're not familiar with Fredrik Backman, and maybe you're going like, that name sounds really familiar. Well, he's been around for a bit, especially his book, A Man Called Ove, became really popular. I think it's his top bestseller, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, like many other authors, he also started out as a journalist in Sweden, which is where he's from. And since then, he's moved into fiction, including writing today's book, Beartown, which, speaking of series, was also adapted into a series on, I think, HBO Max. So again, if you enjoy the book or if you enjoy this video and are like, well, it sounds interesting, but I can't be bothered to read it, or I don't have the time or whatever, I definitely recommend checking out either the series or the audiobook. Now, before we get started, I do want to give a content warning. This story, and therefore this video, does discuss the topic of SA. So if you or somebody you know are sensitive to this topic, I suggest kind of skipping out on this one and coming back for my next video. And if you or somebody you know is a victim of SA, please check out the resources I've put in the description below. So I'll start off just by saying that this, weirdly enough, is primarily a book about hockey. So when I first picked it up, and I'll just give you that warning, it does talk a lot about hockey. So it was a little bit hard for me to get into it at first, just because I was like, what the heck am I reading? I really am not interested in this. But thankfully, our main story is not about hockey, but about something much more sinister. And it's really hard to pinpoint who the main character of this book is, because like in many of Backman's stories, as we saw in Anxious People, for example, he's not one to just have one main character, but a variety of main characters with their own plot lines kind of developing throughout. And in a certain sense, Beartown itself, the town where the story takes place, is technically the main character. Now, for the purposes of this video, and really to me for the main plot of this book, the actual, true main characters or protagonists, I would say, are actually Kevin and Maya. So that'll be kind of who we'll talk about today, but I don't want to, dismiss the fact that there's a lot of other things going on in the story. So let's start off talking about Kevin. So Kevin is the star player of Beartown's junior hockey team, and because of this, he's kind of like a local celebrity, which means that he's kind of used to getting what he wants all the time, because everyone's just kind of like, we all gotta treat Kevin really nicely because he's gonna win the championship, and if we're not like, oh my god, Kevin, you're amazing, then we're gonna like lose and it's gonna be terrible or something. Now, in spite of everyone kind of being like, oh my god, Kevin, you're gonna like save our town, Kevin kind of really has a bit of a challenge, I guess, when it comes to the people closest to him. His parents, while seemingly proud of him, are far too busy with work and other responsibilities to actually spend time with him and make him feel, loved and cared for, or, even important, beyond just like being the town superstar. And his best friend slowly kind of starts drifting away from him, and Kevin kind of has the problem when he feels that he's losing Benji, that he doesn't really know who his friends are, because really everyone in town seems to be wanting to get close to him, mostly because of kind of his like social status. So Maya is Peter Anderson's daughter, and Peter Anderson is actually the general manager of Beartown hockey. So obviously, he knows Kevin, and, she kind of, although, she goes to school with Kevin, but I guess, like the rest of the town, she knows Kevin by reputation because of his status on the hockey team. And Maya mainly hangs out with her best friend Anna. And together they're kind of just like a very fun duo. So one day after a big win of one of the games, they are invited by Kevin to go to like this big party, like a house party that they were having at Kevin's place because his parents were out of town. And so they were going to celebrate their big win over there. So Maya and Anna go to this party. And at one point, Anna kind of gets frustrated because Maya's giving all of her attention to Kevin. And so eventually Maya just kind of like decides to leave because she feels like a third wheel. And this is when suddenly Maya finds herself alone with Kevin in his room. And while Maya is definitely interested in Kevin, you know, she barely knows the dude beyond like, you know, the few words they've spoken. So when he kind of tries to take things a little bit further, Maya wants to stop because she feels uncomfortable and she's not ready for that. But Kevin, obviously not being used to ever being told, no, you can't have this or do that, because, you know, he was so coddled by the town, decides that, you know, that's not going to work for him. And he ends up essaying Maya that night. Now, initially, Maya tries to actually hide the truth of what happened to her. She doesn't really want to tell her parents. She doesn't even tell Anna at all. She thinks it's just, you know, what's best is for her to keep things to herself. But once the truth comes out, the reality of, you know, the consequences of speaking up actually hit Maya way more than she expected, and a brand new nightmare kind of unfolds. So the first kind of major theme that I want to discuss when it comes to this story is the topic of loyalty. In many ways, Beartown is a story about loyalties. And you know, when you live in a small town, people tend to do, you know, to have a sense of loyalty to each other because, you know, everyone kind of knows each other. And even if you don't know each other on a personal level, you know, on like a one-on-one level, everyone still kind of knows who is and isn't from there. And through this division of like insiders versus outsiders, loyalties inevitably begin to form. Now, originally, Maya's position in town is pretty favorable. You know, they know that she is Peter's daughter, and because he was a hockey star himself and even went, you know, pro, they're kind of like, okay, yeah, this girl, she's cool. However, her mom isn't actually from Beartown, and that causes a little bit of tension because of the way that she chooses to live her life. While a lot of the women are probably kind of jealous that she gets to be married to Peter, they also kind of dislike the fact that she decided to have a career instead of being a stay-at-home mom. However, the general favorable opinion towards Maya quickly turns sour when she decides to finally go to the police and talk about what Kevin did to her. For some reason, the people of Beartown interpret this situation as Peter potentially being jealous of Kevin's success or something. And so they decided that Maya decided to go to the police the day of this, like, I think it was like the final or something that they had going on, because they wanted to kind of like take Kevin down or whatever, which doesn't make any sense to me, but hey, I'm expecting sense where there is none. And so the town very quickly makes up their opinion about Maya, many of these people never having even interacted with her. Really, the only people at that time who are on Maya's side, aside from her parents and her brother, are her best friend Maya, who kind of, you know, is filled with rage and ready to just set everything and everyone on fire. And there is also a character called Amat, who is friends with her from school. He's also a hockey player, but he's kind of an outsider as well. However, Amat doesn't actually feel comfortable publicly being on Maya's side, partially because of jealousy and partly because Kevin's family starts trying to bribe him. So without anyone other than her parents and her best friend on her side, Maya is just seen as a traitor for a really long time until Ramona and Emma decide to speak up. I already mentioned kind of, how things went down with Emma, but then Ramona, who is like the town barkeep, and there's like this group of dudes who are super fans of the hockey team who always go to her bar, and they all like see her as a maternal figure, and kind of she has a lot of weight on their opinions and what they do and what they don't do. So when she speaks up as well in this like huge meeting where they're trying to like get Peter to lose his job, it's her being able to be like, well, I don't think it's true that Kevin is as innocent as y'all think he is. That kind of then also helps sway public opinion. And that is essentially the extent to which people are loyal to Maya in this part of the story. So then we have Kevin. So Kevin basically has the rest of the entire town on his side. Everyone just kind of assumes like, well, Kevin, he comes from a good family, he's had a good education, he has such a bright future, like he could get any girl that he wants. Why would he, need to essay somebody? Like, obviously this girl must be lying, she wants attention, he must have rejected her, blah, blah, blah. Y'all know how it goes. However, this really begs the question, are people actually loyal to Kevin? Or are they more so loyal to the reality that he represents, right? This dream that the town could be something more, and they can't do that if they don't have Kevin actively playing. So on the other hand, we have Benji, who is Kevin's best friend, and Benji is kind of in a complicated position because obviously he knows Kevin better than anyone and they've been friends forever, but then because he knows him so well, he does have a little bit of doubt that Kevin is as innocent as he is pretending to be and as the town is trying to make him out to be. And yet the town has decided that Kevin must be protected and Maya must be cast out. Why? Because Kevin is viewed as an insider and Maya is not. So when I was actually reading this book, one thing that came to mind, especially when, we kind of have this turn of events and we get to, what I'm calling the real story instead of the hockey stuff, it reminded me a lot of a play by Arlene Hutton called I Dream Before I Take the Stand. So I read this play when I was in college in my modern drama class, and the play is essentially about this woman who was essayed being cross-examined, and essentially the lawyer who's cross-examining her is trying to make it out to be that what happened to her was obviously her fault. And I remember reading this play and being very upset, It made me pretty angry, and I remember sitting in class and having some classmates kind of comment on how they agreed, why was she wearing those things, and why was she walking in the park by herself, and why was she doing this, and what was she doing that, and kind of that mentality of the victim essentially being at fault for something horrible happening to them. And I remember kind of just being so upset when I read that play and had these conversations about it, and I felt that same type of anger as I read Beartown. And the thing is, as the reader, we are with Maya when she is assaulted. So we know what happened. We were there. The reader is, I think, even more frustrated because you are essentially put in the shoes of the victim. You come to this realization, or at least I did, I don't want to talk for everyone, I guess, that the town has kind of chosen what they think is fair over what's actually just. They essentially think that the most fair outcome to the situation is that Kevin gets to go scot-free, that Kevin gets to continue playing hockey, that he puts their name on the map, that he goes pro, because the town really cares more about itself. And after all, he's worked so hard and the town needs a win, and the downfall, I guess, of Kevin feels almost like a betrayal or something that's unfair to the town, and that's why it's, I think, so easy for them to turn on Maya. And even Maya herself kind of falls into the kind of pitfalls of this mentality. You know, she finds herself going like, well, if I go against Kevin and I do publicly discuss this and I do publicly accuse him, you know what's going to happen to the hockey team, right? Because they're going to lose, and this is a hockey town. What are they going to do without their, like, star? And she thinks, you know, what's going to happen to my dad, the general manager? You know, she doesn't want him to lose his job. She doesn't want people to think differently about her family. She doesn't want to hurt her family with the reality of what happened to her. And even when it comes to just telling her best friend, you know, Anna has a fairly difficult life, and Maya doesn't feel comfortable telling her the truth because, you know, she's kind of like, I don't want to add to her burdens. She just thinks that it's not fair. But when you really think about it, there's a lot that's not fair that happens to victims of assault. And one thing that really struck me about this story is just how true it rang. A lot of people don't feel comfortable speaking up about their abusers because they are mocked, and then their abusers are kind of like defended, and you have to go through that and relive what happened to you and justify what happened to you over and over again while people are in denial. Or, you know, you're forced to go online and sanitize any conversation about it, you know, like the fact that we have to use the, you know, essay instead of saying the actual word because it's not advertiser friendly, or the fact that a lot of these victims are forced into silence because they don't want to be a burden on other people, or because they don't want to face the consequences, well, I guess the backlash, I should say, of telling the truth or hurting people with the truth, especially if the person who hurt them is somebody who is in power or somebody who is close to their family. So in the end, thankfully, the truth does come out, and Amma decides that, you know, some brand new skates and a better job for his mom and piles of money from Kevin's dad aren't enough to actually basically pay for the loss of justice. So he decides to speak up because this town wasn't welcoming to him either. So why would he protect it anymore? And I think one of the saddest parts about this story is the fact that Maya even needed Amma and Ramona to speak up for that to make a change. And even worse is the reality that even if they do speak up, Kevin is probably not going to face the worst consequences. After all, he's rich. Maya, on the other hand, is left with two choices, which are to stay in a town that, even if this goes to court, even if it's proven that Kevin is guilty and all that, are still going to view her as the girl who ruined Beartown's chances of winning the hockey championship or whatever, and or leave the town where she grew up in and basically never be allowed to come back, just so that she doesn't have to run into Kevin or have people kind of saying things about her that aren't true. And even if we just think ahead, right, and we look ahead in the story, you know, we get a glimpse at a reality where Maya is going to spend the rest of her life with this horrible thing that happened to her affecting her day to day. And Kevin freaks out when he sees her again for the first time in years, not because he feels guilty because he did a horrible thing, but because he's concerned that, you know, Maya's going to make a scene and tell his pregnant wife that he did a horrible, horrible thing to her. And I feel like I can never really get through one of these videos without saying that this is a story about love. And in a way it is. I don't think necessarily about romantic love, even though we have kind of, you know, Kira and Peter's marriage. And, you know, Maya did have feelings for Kevin before he was a horrible person, and Amma had feelings for Maya. But I think more than anything, what kind of stands out in the sense of love in this book is the town's love for hockey. Anna and Maya's parents, their love for Maya. I think especially Kira ferociously loves her kids and is very protective of them. And Ahmet's love for his mother. You know, he's constantly trying to make a better way of life for the two of them, and I think that's really, really something special, and I guess something kind of brighter and more wholesome after such a video that it's kind of really doom and gloom. So yeah, there's some positives in there. So what's it all about? In conclusion, I think Beartown is the story of a community that valued a dream more than its reality. It's a story where justice is inspected under a microscope, and we really get to know why fair isn't always just. But overall, I do think that Beartown is a story about love and family and loyalty. It's the story of a family who is absolutely willing to put themselves through the fire and go against their own town to protect their kid. And it's the story about a boy who loved hockey so much that he became a hero to a town, and yet when heroes fall, they don't often stay down very long. However, when people like Maya fall, those bruises last a lifetime. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this video and about this story. And make sure to subscribe for more bookish content like this, and hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload next, and I will see you all next time.